The fog rolled in thick over the Cascade Mountains that October morning in 2001, swallowing the trailhead at North Bend, Washington, in a gray blanket. Marcus Webb, a 34-year-old software engineer from Seattle, pulled his backpack from the trunk of his Honda Civic and checked his supplies one final time. Water bottles, energy bars, first aid kit, compass, and his brand new Nokia phone, a luxury purchase he'd made just weeks before. His girlfriend, Rachel, had begged him to wait until the weather cleared, but Marcus was restless. He'd been cooped up in his cubicle for months, debugging code for a startup that demanded 70-hour weeks. He needed this. Just him, the mountain, and silence. If you're watching this story unfold, make sure to subscribe to our channel and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from viewers around the world. Marcus signed the trail register at 8:47 a.m., scrawling his name in the worn logbook that hundreds had signed before him. The ranger station was empty. Budget cuts had reduced staffing on weekdays. He shouldered his pack and started up the trail, boots crunching on loose gravel. The path wound through Douglas firs and western hemlocks, their branches heavy with moisture. Within an hour, the fog grew denser, reducing visibility to barely 20 feet. Marcus wasn't worried. He'd hiked this trail a dozen times, knew every switchback and rocky outcrop. By noon, he should have reached Marble Point, a scenic overlook that offered sweeping views of the valley below, but the fog had disoriented him more than he realized. Somewhere around the 3-mile marker, he'd veered left instead of right at an unmarked fork, following what looked like a legitimate trail but was actually an old logging road that hadn't been maintained in decades. The path grew narrower, overgrown with blackberry brambles and devil's club. When Marcus finally realized his mistake, he checked his compass and decided to bushwhack back toward the main trail rather than backtrack. That decision would change everything. The terrain grew treacherous, loose shale hidden beneath layers of wet leaves, exposed roots waiting to catch an unwary boot. Marcus was descending a steep embankment, gripping a young alder for support when the tree's shallow roots gave way. He tumbled 15 feet down a ravine, his pack absorbing some of the impact, but his left leg twisting beneath him with a sickening crack. Pain exploded through his ankle. When he tried to stand, his leg buckled immediately. Fractured, maybe broken. He fumbled for his phone, hands shaking, and flipped it open. No signal, not even a single bar. Marcus spent that first night huddled against a fallen cedar log, using his jacket as a blanket and rationing his water. The temperature dropped to 40 degrees. Every few hours, he'd check his phone, hoping for signal, but the ravine was a dead zone. The phone's battery indicator showed 3 bars. He turned it off to conserve power. Back in Seattle, Rachel was already worried. Marcus had promised to call when he got off the trail by 5 p.m. When darkness fell and her calls went straight to voicemail, she contacted the King County Sheriff's Office. Deputy Linda Hartwell took the report, noting Marcus's vehicle at the trailhead. By midnight, a search team was assembled. For 3 days, search and rescue volunteers combed the Cascade foothills. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras swept the area. Search dogs tracked Marcus's scent from the trailhead, but lost it near the 3-mile marker where the trail forked. The fog that had confused Marcus now hindered the searchers. Rachel joined the volunteers, her eyes red from crying and lack of sleep, calling Marcus's name until her voice went hoarse. Meanwhile, Marcus was fighting to survive. His water ran out on day 2. He collected moisture from leaves, licking dew that tasted of earth and decay. The energy bars were gone by day 3. His ankle had swollen to twice its normal size, purple and hot to the touch. Infection was setting in. He tried dragging himself uphill toward where he thought the main trail was, but every movement sent white-hot pain shooting up his leg. After 30 yards, exhausted and dizzy, he gave up. The phone became his lifeline and his torment. He'd turn it on periodically, watching the signal indicator search fruitlessly for a tower. The battery was down to 1 bar. Marcus started keeping a journal using the phone's text message function, typing entries he'd never send, messages to Rachel, apologies, I love yous, regrets about arguments they'd had, about time wasted at work instead of with her. The act of writing kept him sane, gave him purpose beyond just surviving the next hour. On day 5, the official search was scaled back. Resources were needed elsewhere. A child had gone missing in Spokane, pulling personnel east. Rachel refused to accept it. She organized private search parties, spent her savings hiring a private helicopter service. They found nothing. The Cascades had swallowed Marcus completely. Weeks turned to months. Rachel visited the trail every weekend through that winter, leaving supplies at the trailhead, water bottles, thermal blankets, protein bars, hoping Marcus might find them if he was still out there, still alive. Other hikers would take them, leaving notes of encouragement or prayers. A small memorial grew at the trailhead, photos of Marcus, flowers, candles in glass jars. By spring 2002, even Rachel had to accept the inevitable. A memorial service was held at a church in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. Over 200 people attended, co-workers, college friends, family members who flew in from Ohio and California. Rachel stood at the podium, barely able to speak, holding Marcus's favorite fleece jacket against her chest. She talked about his laugh, his terrible jokes, the way he'd spend hours perfecting a single line of code. She didn't say was. She couldn't. Marcus is brilliant. Marcus is kind. Marcus is the love of my life. Time moved on, as it always does. Rachel eventually met someone else, though she never fully let go. She married in 2007, had 2 children, built a good life. But she never stopped wondering, never stopped hoping that somehow, some way, she'd get answers. The years passed, technology evolved, the Nokia phone Marcus carried became obsolete, then vintage, then a curiosity. Flip phones gave way to smartphones, 3G networks became 4G, then 5G. GPS technology that had once required dedicated devices became standard in every phone. Cell towers multiplied across the landscape, filling in the dead zones. In 2023, a research team from the University of Washington's Department of Environmental Science was conducting a biodiversity survey in the Cascade foothills, studying how climate change was affecting plant migration patterns. Graduate student Jennifer Nakamura was collecting soil samples in a remote ravine about 4 miles from the main trail when she noticed something unusual. A flash of faded blue fabric, partially buried beneath years of accumulated forest debris. She approached carefully, then froze. It was a backpack, ancient by outdoor gear standards, its nylon brittle and faded. Beside it, partially concealed by a fallen branch, were human remains. Jennifer marked the location with GPS coordinates and immediately contacted authorities. The King County Medical Examiner's Office recovered the remains along with personal effects. A wallet containing a driver's license for Marcus Webb, a waterlogged compass, and a Nokia 5120 phone sealed in a deteriorated plastic bag. The phone had been Marcus's last-ditch attempt at preservation, wrapping it in a sandwich bag he'd carried for trash. Detective Raymond Torres had been with the sheriff's office for 12 years, too young to have worked the original case. But when he saw Marcus Webb's name on the report, something nagged at him. He pulled the old case files from archives, reading through Rachel's desperate statements, the search reports, the eventual cold case designation. Torres was methodical, known for closing cases others had abandoned. He had a teenage daughter who loved hiking. The case hit close to home. The phone was sent to the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab. Tech specialist David Kowalski examined it skeptically. 22 years in a forest environment, the chances of recovering any data were virtually zero. But the plastic bag had created a partial seal, protecting the device from the worst moisture damage. The battery was corroded, the screen cracked, but the internal circuit board showed surprising integrity. Kowalski worked for 3 weeks, carefully cleaning corrosion, replacing damaged components with salvaged parts from identical vintage phones purchased on eBay. When he finally managed to power it on using an external power source, the screen flickered to life. The date was still set to October 2001. The text message folder contained 17 unsent messages, and buried in the phone's primitive memory was something unexpected: location data. The Nokia 5120 had been an early phone with assisted GPS capability, designed primarily for emergency 911 calls. Even without cellular signal, the phone had attempted to ping nearby cell towers whenever Marcus powered it on. Each attempt created a timestamp and triangulated location estimate, stored locally in the phone's memory. The data was fragmented, corrupted in places, but recoverable. Detective Torres brought in Dr. Elena Vasquez, a geospatial analyst who specialized in cold case investigations. She'd helped locate missing persons before using historical cell tower data. Together, they reconstructed Marcus's final days with startling precision. The data showed Marcus had stayed near the crash site for the first 4 days, the phone's location barely moving more than 50 yards. On day 5, there was movement, a quarter-mile northwest, then stops and starts suggesting he was trying to crawl. On day 7, the location jumped another 100 yards. He was moving toward higher ground, toward signal, toward rescue. The final ping came on day 9, October 29th, 2001, at 3:47 p.m. The phone's battery finally died. The location was approximately 3/4 of a mile from the main trail, in a narrow ravine that the 2001 search teams had missed. They'd been searching too close to the trail, assuming Marcus couldn't have gone far. But his determination to survive had driven him further than anyone imagined. Dr. Vasquez created a detailed map showing Marcus's entire journey. The medical examiner's report confirmed what the data suggested. Marcus had survived at least 9 days, possibly longer. Cause of death was determined to be a combination of infection, dehydration, and hypothermia. He'd fought with everything he had. Detective Torres faced a difficult task. Rachel had moved on, built a new life. Did she need to know these details? Did it help or hurt to understand exactly how Marcus had died? Torres spent a sleepless night considering his options before deciding that truth, however painful, was better than not knowing. He drove to Rachel's home in Redmond on a Tuesday afternoon. She answered the door with flour on her hands, baking with her youngest daughter. When she saw Torres's badge, the color drained from her face. She knew before he said a word. They sat in her kitchen while her children played in the backyard. Torres explained everything: the discovery, the phone, the data. He'd brought printed maps, the GPS timeline, but he let Rachel decide if she wanted to see them. She stared at her hands for a long moment, then quietly asked to read the text messages. Torres handed her his tablet with the messages transcribed. Marcus's words, frozen in time for 22 years. Rachel, I'm hurt, but okay. Don't worry. I'll get back to you. Always. A day 2, ankle bad, no signal, but I'm tougher than this mountain. I love you. Saw a deer today. She looked at me like she understood. I'm not giving up. Day 5, moving toward higher ground. Every inch is victory. Think about your smile. It keeps me going. Rachel, if you're reading this someday, know that you were my last thought, my best thought, my only thought. I tried so hard to get back to you. Rachel read them all, tears streaming silently down her face. When she finished, she looked up at Torres. He was trying to come home. He was, Torres said quietly, until the very end. The story made national news. Major networks picked it up. The hiker who'd been missing for 22 years finally found through technology that didn't exist when he disappeared. But for Rachel, it wasn't about the technology. It was about closure, about knowing Marcus hadn't given up, that he'd fought for every minute, every breath, trying to get back to her. The University of Washington held a memorial symposium about the case, discussing how modern technology could solve cold cases. They established the Marcus Webb Memorial Fund, providing GPS emergency beacons to low-income hikers. The state legislature passed a bill requiring all trail registers to include QR codes linking to real-time weather and emergency contact information. Rachel attended the memorial, bringing her husband and children. She spoke publicly for the first time about the 22 years of not knowing, the grief that never fully healed because there was no ending. "Now there's an ending," she said to the assembled crowd of students, rangers, and journalists. "Not the one I wanted, but Marcus deserves to be remembered not just for how he died, but for how hard he tried to live." Marcus was buried in a cemetery overlooking Puget Sound, the water grey and peaceful under an overcast sky. Rachel placed the recovered Nokia phone in a small display case on his headstone, along with a plaque that read, "He never stopped trying, he never stopped hoping, he never stopped loving." Years later, Jennifer Nakamura, the graduate student who'd found Marcus, completed her PhD and became a leading voice in search and rescue technology. She testified before Congress about improving wilderness tracking systems. She thought often about that October day when she'd uncovered a tragedy 2 decades old. In her office, she kept a photo of Marcus from his memorial, a reminder that behind every cold case statistic was a person who'd fought to survive, a family who'd never stopped searching, and love that transcended even death. Rachel still hikes the Cascades, though never alone. She brings her children, teaching them wilderness safety, showing them how to read a map and use a GPS beacon. On clear days, they can see for miles, and she thinks about Marcus somewhere out there for 9 days, searching for signal, for hope, for a way home. The mountains are beautiful and terrible in equal measure. They give and they take. But they also remember, holding their secrets until the day truth finally emerges, sometimes through the most unexpected means. A broken phone that refused to forget, and data that waited patiently for 22 years to tell the whole story. The media attention eventually faded, as it always does, but the impact of Marcus Webb's story rippled outward in ways no one could have predicted. Detective Torres received commendations from the sheriff's office and began teaching a course on cold case investigation at the Seattle Police Academy, using Marcus's case as a cornerstone example of perseverance and evolving technology. He'd frame lectures around a simple principle: evidence doesn't disappear, it waits. David Kowalski, the tech specialist who'd resurrected the Nokia phone, found himself inundated with requests from other jurisdictions. Police departments across the country began shipping him old phones recovered from unsolved cases, devices pulled from rivers, buried in backyards, found in abandoned vehicles. Most yielded nothing, circuits too damaged by time and elements, but occasionally he'd recover a text message, a photo, a fragment of data that cracked a case wide open. He kept Marcus's phone on his workbench, a talisman reminding him why the painstaking work mattered. For Rachel, life continued with the strange duality of grief finally acknowledged. Her husband Thomas had known about Marcus from their first date. She'd been honest about the ghost that lived in the corners of her heart. Thomas never felt threatened by a memory. If anything, he admired Marcus for inspiring such enduring love. Their children, Emma and Lucas, grew up knowing about Uncle Marcus, the man who'd loved their mother before they existed, whose determination became a family legend about never giving up. Emma, the eldest, developed a fascination with search and rescue work. At 16, she joined the King County Explorer Search and Rescue Program, training in wilderness survival, first aid, and tracking. Rachel watched her daughter master skills that might have saved Marcus, and felt both pride and an old, familiar ache. Emma wore a small GPS beacon on every training exercise, its blinking light a promise. I can always be found. The autumn after Marcus's burial, Rachel returned to the trail for the first time since 2001. She'd avoided it for years, unable to face the place that had taken him. But now, with closure, she felt drawn back. Thomas offered to come, but she needed to do this alone. She parked at the same trailhead where Marcus had parked 24 years earlier, the lot now paved and expanded, equipped with solar-powered emergency call boxes. The trail register was digital now, requiring hikers to scan a QR code and provide emergency contact information. Rachel signed in, listing Thomas and her children, then started up the familiar path. The Douglas firs seemed taller, or perhaps she'd simply forgotten their majesty. The fog was light today, just wisps threading through branches. She hiked slowly, deliberately, past the 3-mile marker where Marcus had taken the wrong turn. A newer trail had been cut, clearly marked with reflective blazes and directional signs. Improvements made after Marcus's case highlighted how easy it was to get lost. Rachel followed the old fork anyway, the one Marcus had taken, pushing through undergrowth that had reclaimed the abandoned logging road. GPS coordinates from Detective Torres guided her to the ravine where Marcus had fallen. Someone had been there before her. A small wooden cross marked the spot, weathered but sturdy, with Marcus's name and dates carved into the crossbeam. Wildflowers grew around its base, lupines and Indian paintbrush, their colors vivid against the dark soil. Rachel knelt beside it, pressing her palm against the earth where Marcus had spent his final days. "I'm sorry it took so long to find you," she whispered. The forest absorbed her words, indifferent and eternal. "But we never stopped looking. I never stopped." She stayed there for an hour, maybe more, telling Marcus about the children he'd never meet, the life she'd built, the ways his memory had shaped her. She told him about Emma's search and rescue training, about Lucas's fascination with coding, following in Marcus's footsteps without ever having known him. She told him that she'd been happy, which felt both like a betrayal and the greatest tribute she could offer. He'd died trying to get back to her so she could live. When Rachel finally stood to leave, she noticed something glinting in the leaf litter, a piece of plastic, faded blue. She picked it up, recognizing it immediately. A fragment of the sandwich bag that had preserved Marcus's phone, evidence of his resourcefulness, his refusal to surrender. She slipped it into her pocket, a tangible piece of his fight. The hike back seemed shorter. Rachel emerged from the forest as afternoon light slanted golden through the trees, and she felt lighter somehow, as if she'd laid down a burden she'd carried so long she'd forgotten its weight. At the trailhead, a young couple was preparing to hike, checking their GPS watches and adjusting their packs. They looked so young, so confident in their preparation and technology. Rachel almost stopped them, almost shared Marcus's story as a cautionary tale, but they were laughing together, excited, alive with possibility. She didn't want to cast shadows over their adventure. Instead, she simply said, "Beautiful day for a hike. Stay safe out there." The young woman smiled. "Always do. Got my beacon, my phone, my emergency kit. Prepared for anything." Rachel nodded, returning the smile, and walked to her car. No one is truly prepared for anything, she thought. But we try, we do our best, we keep going. That evening, Rachel showed Thomas the plastic fragment she'd found. He held it carefully, understanding its significance without explanation. "Should we keep it?" he asked. No, Rachel decided. It belongs with him. The next weekend, the whole family returned to the cemetery. Emma and Lucas had made a small shadow box in woodshop class, lining it with velvet and adding a photo of Marcus from his 20s, grinning at the camera with a backpack slung over one shoulder. Rachel placed the plastic fragment inside, along with a copy of the GPS data that had finally revealed his location and a handwritten note. "You found your way home." They sealed the shadow box and mounted it on the headstone beside the display case holding his phone. Emma arranged fresh flowers, mountain lupines, Marcus's favorites according to family stories. Lucas, only 12 and usually shy, spoke up unexpectedly. "Do you think he knows we're here?" Rachel considered the question seriously. She'd never been particularly religious, never found comfort in platitudes about heaven or spirits watching over, but standing there with her family, with the Puget Sound stretching blue and infinite behind them, she chose to believe in something. "I think," she said slowly, "that love doesn't disappear. It changes form, maybe. It becomes memories and stories and the way we treat each other. Marcus's love for me is part of what made you possible. So yes, in a way he's here. He's always been here." Emma squeezed her mother's hand. Thomas wrapped an arm around Lucas's shoulders. They stood together in silence, 5 people connected across time, 2 generations, 1 ghost, and love that refused to die. The years continued their inevitable march. Detective Torres retired in 2028, having closed 17 cold cases using techniques pioneered during Marcus's investigation. At his retirement party, he gave a speech crediting not his own skill, but the determination of people like Marcus, who left breadcrumbs, however small, for others to follow. Dr. Vasquez's geospatial analysis methods became standard protocol in missing persons investigations nationwide. She taught seminars internationally, always beginning with Marcus Webb's case, how 19 GPS pings and 17 unsent text messages had revealed truth after 22 years. "Data persists," she'd tell her students. "Hope persists. We must persist." Jennifer Nakamura, whose discovery had started everything, served on the board of the Marcus Webb Memorial Fund, helping distribute emergency beacons to hundreds of hikers. She never forgot that October afternoon in 2023, how a flash of blue fabric had caught her eye, how everything changed in an instant. Her research on climate change and plant migration eventually won prestigious awards, but she considered finding Marcus her most important contribution. The broken Nokia phone in its display case became something of a pilgrimage site. Hikers would stop at Marcus's grave before tackling the Cascades, leaving small tokens, trail mix, water bottles, GPS coordinates written on paper scraps. Other families who'd lost loved ones in the wilderness would visit, finding solace in Marcus's story. At least they'd found him. At least there were answers. In 2030, on what would have been Marcus's 63rd birthday, Rachel published a memoir titled The Long Search. It wasn't maudlin or self-pitying. Instead, she wrote about resilience, about building a life while grieving, about the strange mathematics of loss and love. The book became a quiet bestseller, resonating with anyone who'd ever lost someone without closure, without goodbye. Rachel donated all proceeds to wilderness safety programs and search and rescue operations. She did book tours, speaking at libraries and bookstores, and invariably someone in the audience would cry, not from sadness, but from recognition. We all carry ghosts. We all search for answers. We all hope that someday, somehow, the lost will be found. Emma graduated from the University of Washington with a degree in emergency management. She joined King County Search and Rescue full-time, becoming one of their youngest team leaders. On her first official rescue, a teenager who'd wandered off-trail during a school camping trip, Emma found the boy within 4 hours using GPS tracking and systematic grid searching. The boy's mother sobbed with relief, hugging Emma repeatedly. Emma thought of Marcus, of her mother's 22-year wait, and felt grateful beyond measure that this family wouldn't have to wonder. Lucas followed his aptitude for technology, landing a job at a Seattle startup developing advanced emergency location systems for wilderness areas. The technology used satellite networks that worked even in remote canyons and ravines, dead zones like the one that had trapped Marcus. Lucas's co-workers knew the story, knew why he pushed so hard for reliability, for redundancy, for systems that wouldn't fail when someone's life depended on them. "I'm building the phone my mum's first love needed," Lucas told a journalist profiling the company. "I can't save him, but maybe I can save someone else." Thomas watched his stepchildren carry Marcus's legacy forward and never felt jealous. How could he? They were honoring someone who'd shaped their mother, who'd fought with everything he had to survive. Thomas had always known he'd married a woman with a complicated past. That past had made her who she was, strong, appreciative of every moment, unwilling to take love for granted. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Thomas surprised Rachel with a gift, a star registry certificate. He'd named a star after Marcus Webb, coordinates permanently recorded in astronomical databases. "He's still out there," Thomas said, wrapping his arms around his wife, "still fighting, still loving you. And that's okay. There's room in your heart for both of us." Rachel cried, but they were good tears, clean tears. "How did I get so lucky twice?" she whispered. "Not luck," Thomas replied. "You're just someone worth coming home to." The Cascade Trail system eventually installed a memorial plaque at the 3-mile fork, where Marcus had made his fatal wrong turn. The plaque didn't dwell on his death. Instead, it celebrated his fight. Marcus Webb, October 2001. He never gave up. May his determination inspire all who walk these trails. Hikers would pause there, reading the plaque, adjusting their GPS devices, double-checking their maps. Some would take photos. Others would simply stand in silence, imagining a young man full of hope and determination, not knowing that a single choice would lead to 9 days of survival against impossible odds. The forest around the plaque continued its cycles, trees growing, falling, decomposing into soil that fed new growth. Deer browsed the undergrowth. Ravens called from high branches. The mountain was indifferent to human tragedy, but the humans who crossed its slopes remembered. They remembered Marcus. They remembered to be careful, prepared, and humble before nature's power. Rachel visited the trail less frequently as she aged, her knees protesting the steep grades. But she never stopped thinking about Marcus, especially in October when the fog rolled in thick and grey. Some memories fade. Others remain sharp as broken glass, cutting deep no matter how much time passes. On the 30th anniversary of Marcus's disappearance, a documentary crew interviewed Rachel for a special about unsolved cases technology had finally cracked. Sitting in her living room, surrounded by photos of her children and grandchildren, Emma had given her twins the year before. Rachel reflected on 3 decades of missing and finding. "Do you have any regrets?" the interviewer asked. Rachel considered the question carefully. "I regret that last argument before he left. Something stupid about forgetting to buy milk. I regret not going with him that day, even though I know logically I couldn't have prevented what happened. But I don't regret loving him. I don't regret the years I spent searching, and I don't regret moving forward with my life. Marcus would have wanted that. He died trying to get back to me so I could live." "What do you want people to remember about his story?" Rachel looked directly at the camera, her eyes still bright despite the years. Remember that love doesn't end when someone dies. Remember that data, evidence, truth, they wait patiently to be discovered. Remember that every person who goes missing is someone's Marcus, someone's child, partner, friend. They deserve to be found. Their families deserve answers. And remember, her voice cracked slightly, remember to tell the people you love that you love them. Every single day, because you never know when you'll get one more chance. The documentary aired to critical acclaim, generating renewed interest in cold cases and wilderness safety. The Marcus Webb Memorial Fund received its largest donation influx ever, allowing them to distribute emergency beacons to every high school outdoor education program in Washington state. Emma watched the documentary with her twins sleeping in her arms, thinking about her mother's strength, her biological father's determination, and the strange, beautiful way tragedy could inspire change. She wondered what Marcus would think if he could see everything that had come from his death, the lives saved, the policies changed, the technologies developed. Lucas upgraded his company's emergency location system again, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Every improvement, every line of code was a conversation with a man he'd never met. "I'm making sure no one else's mom has to wait 22 years, he'd say during late-night development sessions. Thomas, now retired, volunteered at the King County Search and Rescue Headquarters, managing logistics and coordinating with families of the missing. He'd seen how Rachel had survived the not knowing, and he made it his mission to provide answers as quickly as possible. Every family he helped felt like honoring Marcus's memory. The broken Nokia phone sat in its display case, a relic of a different technological era, but a timeless testament to human resilience. The text messages Marcus had typed in those final days, declarations of love, promises to fight, attempts to maintain hope, had been quoted in graduation speeches, memorial services, and motivational books. His words, meant only for Rachel, had touched millions. Dr. Vasquez, now grey-haired and nearing her own retirement, still kept Marcus's case file on her desk. She'd solved dozens of missing persons cases since 2023, each one important, each family deserving closure. But Marcus was first. Marcus was the one who'd shown her that old data could reveal new truths, that technology and determination could overcome even decades of silence. Detective Torres, enjoying retirement on Whidbey Island, would occasionally receive calls from former colleagues asking advice on cold cases. He'd always start the same way. "Tell me about the evidence. Tell me what persists." Then he'd walk them through the lessons learned from Marcus Webb. How to think creatively about old technology, how to never give up on the missing, how a broken phone could speak truth across 22 years. And Rachel grew old with grace and gratitude. She watched her children build families, careers, and lives shaped by a man they'd never met but whose influence was undeniable. She held her grandchildren and told them stories about Marcus, keeping his memory alive not as tragedy but as testament. A testament to love, a testament to fighting, a testament to the human spirit's refusal to surrender. On quiet mornings, Rachel would sit on her deck overlooking Puget Sound with her coffee and think about parallel lives, the one she'd lived, and the one she might have lived if Marcus had taken the right fork at the 3-mile marker. Both versions of her were real. Both had loved deeply. Both had found happiness, though through very different paths. The mountains rose in the distance, eternal and indifferent. The fog would roll in and burn away, seasons cycling endlessly. Hikers would set out with hope and preparation, most returning safely. A few becoming statistics, mysteries, searches. The wilderness gave and took according to no moral logic, no fairness, no reason. But humans fought. They loved. They remembered. They turned tragedy into meaning, loss into purpose, grief into action. They took a broken phone and 17 unsent messages and built memorials, changed policies, saved lives. They took one man's final days and transformed them into a story that would echo far beyond his death. Marcus Webb disappeared in October 2001. He was found in October 2023. But his story, his real story, was never about disappearing or being found. It was about fighting for every breath. About loving so deeply that even death couldn't silence it. About data that waited patiently, faithfully, holding truth until the day technology caught up with tragedy. The GPS coordinates that revealed his location were now monuments on a map, digital markers that would persist as long as satellites circled the Earth. The phone that captured his final movements sat in its glass case, visited by thousands, inspiring countless others to prepare better, care deeper, and never stop searching for the lost. And somewhere in the vast network of human memory, in Rachel's heart, in Emma and Lucas's determination, in every life saved by improved wilderness safety protocols, Marcus Webb was still fighting, still loving, still trying to come home.